Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Lafort. I'm with OFA's Policy Research Department, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn webinar on fire prevention and insurance. So this year, OFA's Board of Directors has chosen to prioritize our work with the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs to help educate our members and reduce their risk of experiencing a fire on the farm. The fire chiefs did join us at the exhibit at the Canadian Dairy Expo and the Pork Congress to help us get more information out to our members. And while no one wants to see a fire on the farm, unfortunately, accidents happen. So it is also important to be confident that our members have the right insurance coverage in case of such an event. Which brings us to our two guest speakers today. Our first speaker will be Sean Edwards, the Deputy Fire Chief and Fire Prevention Officer in West Grey Fire Service. He's an active member of the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, sitting on the Rural and Suburban Advisory Committee. He has 20 years of experience in fire service and over 10 years being in the chief officer role. Also with us is Ben Eastman. Ben was raised on a dairy farm in Eastern Ontario and is a farm insurance specialist for cooperators. In his day-to-day roles, he's responsible for the development of understanding of farmers and the risks they face within the cooperators group of companies. He's a recent graduate of the Sobey School of Business with a master's in management, cooperatives and credit unions, while also holding his fellowship of Chartered Insurance Professional designation. And Ben currently resides in Bowmanville, Ontario, with his wife and two daughters. Without any further ado, I will hand it over to Sean with the first presentation. Take it away, Sean.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. First of all, I'd like to say Happy Agriculture Week to everyone, and thank you for all the work that Ontario farmers do from farm to table for us. And I'd also like to throw in that this week is also Fire Prevention Week. Every year, the first full week of October is dedicated to Fire Prevention Week. And each year there's a theme attached to it. And this year's theme is smoke alarms, make them work for you. And just a little bit of background on Fire Prevention Week. It started following the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, which ironically, as legend has it, was started in Mrs. O'Leary's barn as she was milking cows and a cow knocked over a kerosene lantern. That fire was in 1871 and led to the start of Fire Prevention Week in the early 1920s. So I have a presentation that I've put together with the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, just basically to talk about some things that your local fire department can do to help you with fire safety. So just a few of the things quickly that we're going to go over here. Preventative measures, what fire safety plans are, training opportunities that you might have at your operations for your local fire department. Level of service. It's important that you understand what levels of service that your fire department offers. Emergency response plans, water sources, let it burn policies, and kind of outlining how to call 911 in the event of emergency. So preventative measures, we always wanted, the fire service really would like to be more proactive when it comes to fire prevention, and especially in our agricultural community. So request a tour of your operation with your local fire department. Reach out to your local fire department and say, hey, maybe you've done a renovation or you've completed a new build or something like that. They would be happy to come out and do a site visit, whether it's just a fire prevention officer or even they may come on one of their training evenings if it's a volunteer department, just to get a tour around. The more we know about things ahead of time, the better we can plan for in the event that there's an emergency. And while they're at that tour, both the operator and the fire department can talk about fire safety strategies. And the operator can also help make the fire department aware of any possible hazards that you may have at your operation. Things the fire service likes to see in a proactive way is that you have an emergency response plan ready for any emergency, and that any staff you have been trained to know what to do in the event of emergency. Ensure the facility's name and 911 address is easily seen. That includes day and night, winter, summer. Those 911 road signs can easily kind of get overgrown and overlooked, especially in the winter. You start piling up snow. If we can't find the address, we're going to have a hard time finding you to get there to help. Always make sure at any time the business is in operation that there's somebody's in charge, a supervisor, somebody is there who knows and can coordinate the efforts of others in the event of emergency, someone who kind of takes charge of the situation, and somebody that will meet the fire department and give them directions. I know from experience, some farming operations are quite expansive, and just because you pull in the laneway that the address marker's on doesn't mean necessarily you're anywhere near where the actual emergency is yet. Post and review maps of your property, buildings and structures, and water sources. So this has been something that you can do privately and provide that information to your local fire department. You can get lock boxes to keep some of that information confidential, but make sure the fire department has a key and knows where the location of that box is on the property. And that just gives us something to grab as soon as we get there to help us orientate ourselves. So your local fire department can help you develop a preventative maintenance and housekeeping schedule, and we like to encourage not only farming operations, but all businesses and homeowners to have your buildings and machinery inspected regularly by a licensed contractor. So whether that's systems in your barn or the furnace in your house or your wood stove and chimney. Train your employees on what to do in case of emergency, and always make sure that you have somebody on site who is going to be designated as a supervisor or a person in charge. And develop a fire safety plan and share that with your local fire department. So in the picture here is what I said, like a commercially available lockbox that clearly states this is the fire safety plan, and that the fire department would have a key for. You don't necessarily have to use one exactly like this, but that's an example of what I was talking about. So some things that we would like to see in a fire safety plan is obviously if the facility's full name and address, owner of the facility and contact information, police and fire service contacts, other things like local heavy equipment contractors, or if you have any specialty equipment that you need, if something's going wrong with it or it's breaking down, names of those licensed contractors that we could call on your behalf and say, this piece of equipment is not, we're having a problem with it, and you're the person we were told to contact to help us with it. And you could have things like the Spills Action Center number in there for us as well, if you're dealing with anything. And if you're into having pesticides and things like that, any contact information we need for that. Listing of any hazardous or flammable materials or combustible items and their locations. Dust and gas accumulations. listing of what kind of vehicles and machinery, gas or diesel powered equipment, or diesel storage, propane storage, then the locations of them on the farm, aerosol sprays, hot works. Do you have a section or a building that's dedicated to welding, grinding, or cutting? And outline in the fire safety plan things for your staff to do, like no smoking policy or designated smoking areas, and escape and evacuation routes and procedures for your staff. Some existing fire prevention practices. So we know that a lot of our local farmers are trying to be proactive and trying to do what they can, and we're just trying to help get the message out that, for example, with a fire extinguisher, they're a great piece of fire safety equipment. But if it's something that just gets purchased and hung on the wall or mounted in a tractor and never gets looked at, or there's no training provided to any staff on how to use them, chances are when it needs to be used, it either may not work or the person might not be comfortable using it. So inspect your fire extinguishers regularly. If you have alarm systems in your buildings, test your alarm systems. If they're monitored by an outside monitoring company, have a technician come in and do an annual inspection on them. Inspect your fire exit signs and other emergency signage monthly to ensure they're always functional and visible, and keep exits clear. Electrical, mechanical, and structural inspection schedule. You can come up with a regular maintenance schedule that if you don't have one, it can almost seem a little bit daunting, but you can make these as simple or as elaborate as you want. And if you sign somebody that once a month, here's the checklist, and we need you to go around and check these things, and go along with it a maintenance and cleaning checklist and schedule. Drawings of structures and storage or identified locations. Again, like I said, we know that the 911 sign at the end of the laneway doesn't necessarily mean we've arrived at where the emergency is. So we need to know, and preferably in advance, the layout of your operation, and whether it's in the barn or if it's a drying and storage facility, where the dryers are, where the propane is, if it's fired by propane. All those types of things help us proactively form a plan of attack before we even arrive. So training opportunities. Like I said at the beginning, you are the experts in your field. You know your operations inside and out. Us in the fire service, we don't necessarily know what exactly it is you do, how you do it, how your machinery works. I have been involved in some training and some incidents on heavy farm machinery accidents, and working on a heavy piece of farm machinery is a lot different than when we go to a regular automobile accident. Fire departments benefit greatly by having their local farmers and other businesses invite us out to have a look around and show us, do some show and tell for us. And it can go a long way in the event of an emergency to help things run a lot smoother. So please reach out to your local fire department should you have any opportunity to have them come out and have a look around, or talk to your local fire department about setting up a training scenario on a Saturday or something like that. Level of service. So every fire department is governed by what's called an establishing and regulating bylaw that their local municipality approves, and that essentially sets out the level of services that the fire department provides. The fire department has long been blanketed as a catch-all, as in when in doubt, call the fire department and they'll come help you. But not all fire departments offer the same type of technical rescue services. So if your operation has been in silos and grain storage, for example, your local fire department might not have high angle rescue service that they provide, or the grain and bin rescue that you may require, even though you may assume that they do. So it's a great idea to contact your local fire department and give them a little bit of background of what it is your operation does, and they can tell you exactly what sort of service they might be able to provide you. Now, I can tell you that in our area just last week, there was a tragic accident on a agricultural business where two workers unfortunately lost their lives, and the fire department was involved in that. And just yesterday in our area, there was a fire at a bin and silos storage as well. And fortunately, there was no injuries in that one. Another thing to consider is hazardous materials. If your operation works with any types of hazardous materials, or even if it's pesticides, etc., your local fire department might not be offer that hazardous material assistance to do mitigation and cleanup as either. So an emergency response plan is similar. It kind of is a portion of the fire safety plan. So if you didn't want to go through the motions to create a complete fire safety plan, we would highly recommend that you focus on creating just an emergency response plan. And again, it just talks about, some of the hazards of your operation, where things are, a layout of it, and what your staff is going to do in the event of emergency. Put somebody in charge, have them meet the fire department to make sure we get to where we need to go. And like time is of the essence. There was a question posed before this presentation about, how long does it take the average fire department to get to a farm address? That varies widely across the province, and it is all depending on where you're located and where your closest fire department is. But when time is of the essence during an emergency, some pre-planning and stuff will make it a lot easier for us to get there, and it could be the difference between a rescue or a recovery. So we get into water sources. Some municipalities have, and others are considering making it mandatory that any building over a certain square footage that is not serviced by municipal water service has to have an on-site water source, but a lot of places do not have that yet. So something to consider is that you may even have this already. It doesn't have to be a underground water storage holding tank. Your farm may have a pond on it already. Your farm may have a river running through it somewhere. If you can identify that and keep an area of that with access that a fire truck could get to, they can immediately have access to water to fight a fire. Failing that, like I said, there are the options of in-ground storage tanks. Something to consider when you are contemplating doing a new build or a major renovation. It's something that you can look into, and maybe when we get into our insurance side of it, the insurance could speak to more if there may be insurance breaks if you can prove to your insurance company that you have so many gallons of water on site. Let it burn policies. Some of you may already be aware of this. Some of you may already have this, but it's important that your fire department is made aware. If you do have, I have experience personally with a agricultural business that we had a let it burn policy because of the pesticide storage they had on site. They had proper containment and everything set up for it, and it was better for the environment in the event that there was a fire in the building where these were stored, that it just burns off and it burns hot, because adding water to it would slow down the burning, dilute the pesticides, and possibly contaminate the environment with runoff. So it's, if you have that, and sometimes it's done through your suppliers and it's regulated by the government. If you have over so many liters of this product, you have to have a let it burn policy. But if that policy doesn't filter its way down to your fire department, that they are made aware of it, they may arrive and our first instinct is to put water on the fire. And if we start doing that and then someone comes along and says, oh no, you're not supposed to do that, don't put water on it, it could be too late and we could have some environmental damage. Responding to an emergency. So emergency personnel often determine their response strategy on the way to the scene based on information provided by 911. And if we can combine that with the fact that we know, hey, we've been here before, we did a tour of this site, we know what we're getting into, we know that there's a lockbox with a fire safety plan there that's going to give us some more details as soon as we get there. So it's imperative that you exercise some preventative measures to ensure emergency services are prepared in the event of a fire. And making a call to 911. Some of you may have had to call 911 before for a number of reasons. Some of you may have not. So it's very important when you call 911, they will ask you for what service that you immediately need. Sometimes there's more than one needed, but they will give you three options. Do you need police, fire, or ambulance? And you have to pick one, at least one of them to get started with. And then they're going to need your name and a callback number. And basically as much information as you can quickly give them about where you are, what's happening, what the needs are, and in actual locations. So you're at this is the address where the farm is, but we're in barn number C or wherever it might be. If you can have somebody meet the responders at the laneway to give them further directions, things of that nature. And don't hang up on 911 until they tell you you can. And always make sure your phone is left on so that the 911 could call you back should they need to. So that is the end of the presentation. And I'd like to thank for the graphics here that we've got from the Fire and Life Safety Educators of Ontario. It was a social media campaign they did a number of years ago, and they gave me permission to use these. And I'd like to thank the Ontario Federation of Agriculture for partnering with the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs and helping get the fire safety message out there. So I'm not sure if we're going to go to questions at this time or
I think we'll do that at the end. Thank you, Sean. So just a reminder to everybody on the webinar, if you have a question, just post it into the chat. And at the end of Ben's presentation, we will read out the questions to Sean and Ben in the order in which they've been asked. Thanks again, Sean. Really great information. And now we will send it over to Ben to talk about the insurance implications.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. Ben, as always, thanks for having me. Folks, I'm just going to load up my screen here and get it presenting for you so you can see it okay. Let me get this live. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, we can see it. It's not in full screen mode, though.
Let me flip that over. Is that a little bit better there, Ben?
That's perfect.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So, folks, we'll get underway here. Ben's going to catch any questions for me. So, the segment I'm presenting today is insurance. What's going on? Sean was talking about some of the things they'd like to see from fire prevention, establishing protocols inside your operations to ensure safety. Ultimately, if there's a fire, generally the insurance is going to be involved. So I'm here to talk about that today. The topic is trends, changes, and things to be aware of wanted to start off this session, folks. I know I was talking to mom last night. It's bean season for us. Dad's in the middle of beans. A lot of you are probably in the middle of harvest or getting ready for harvest or halfway through or in and out. So I want to take a moment to say thank you for all the things you do, keeping us fed. Tough job, right? Being a farmer, not an easy job. Not every signs up to do it, and those who do, it's very appreciated. I know you don't hear that enough as Ontario farmers and Canadian farmers in general, but we did want to take an opportunity to say thank you for everything you do for us and putting food on the table. And I hope that after this session, you're more knowledgeable, educated, and able to better protect your operations. And as well, hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend as well. Who am I? Ben did a wonderful job introducing me. Thanks, Ben. So I'll go through this quickly. I'm the senior consultant for the Cooperators General Insurance Company. I work in all regions excluding the province of Quebec, so from BC to Newfoundland and everywhere in between, excluding the province of Quebec, working with our advisors and developing their proficiency in farm, as well as providing consultation to the organization, the group of companies, being a cooperative organization, ensuring that we have the proper information to support our farm clients and making sure that their financial futures are protected and secure so you can continue to do the things you love and continue to feed the country. Graduated of the University of Guelph, as well as of St. Mary's most recently, and a fellow charter insurance professional. Talk a bit about what's going on in the Ontario farm markets. Lots of change, folks, lots of disruption, lots of things happening. I'm going to bring you up to speed on some of those things to be aware of on your policy. Some of the big, just a quick high level, couple big ticket items that I'd like you to be aware of as you're speaking to your insurance professionals, you're looking through your renewals that are probably coming up in the next couple of months or even the next couple of weeks, as well as some risk management, mitigation, and prevention, and versus the transfer aspect of it. So we'll get really into the weeds on some of those things. It's really, really cool offerings available to farmers and their operations to help with that mitigation and prevention stuff. So excited to speak to you about that. If you have any questions, please throw it in the chat and we'll discuss it at the end. But thanks again for joining us today. Also, we'll start the walk, folks. All seasons here, all different types of things going on. Thank you for joining me on the walk today. And as said, if we have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. There are no stupid questions. There are no questions that should not have a response. And if I can't find them for you today, folks, I will get them and get them back to you through our partners at the OFA. So thanks again, Ben and Joanne, for having me on as well. Throughout this presentation, folks, you might find yourself saying, Ben, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Good. If you have those questions, please throw them in there. Insurance is a contractual agreement between two parties to ensure that the terms are met, that people are receiving what they expect to receive. If you have those questions, folks, don't hesitate to ask. Happy to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I will get you an answer or I will find the appropriate party to help you answer them. Key issues inside the Ontario insurance market currently, folks. You'll hear about this on the news, the auto theft, right? Auto theft is wild right now. It's out of control. Lots of things coming in to help limit those exposures, but that's driving auto insurance premiums. Not really around the farm as much, but we do see those rolling into some of the light use vehicles, the F-150s and things, and Dodges that are being stolen at a higher rate. That's driving up some premiums. Catastrophic weather events. What's going on with Hurricane Milton right now in the Gulf is a good example of storms are getting bigger, they're getting faster. Milton's kind of the way they're talking about Milton, it's pressing the boundaries of the planetary limits in terms of what a storm can and can't be. Those events are happening at an all-time high, just not even just size and severity, but the frequency of them. That results in increasing premiums. There's more damage. We've seen that across the country. We just had a large couple weather events here in the province of Ontario through the Toronto region, primarily that Oakville, Mississauga territory, with some really high waterfall in a 3-4 day period. Storm severity, same thing, increasing, especially in the province of Ontario. We are seeing more wind and water type losses than ever before. Wind speeds are increasing. It is not unusual to see, if you have, well, I'm assuming most of you have the Weather Network on the TV every day. I know it's on, I think it's on 23 hours a day at the Eastman household. But you have the weather alerts coming through your phone now too. I'm in Bowmanville. I get a squall warning probably every 2 or 3 days now. Squall, you kind of, first you're like, oh boy, a squall. And it's almost now like a text message. Oh, squall today. Okay. That's becoming normal. That's a normal thing that we're seeing throughout the province, and whether it's Eastern Ontario, and we had a derecho a couple of years ago, and a derecho was essentially a sideways tornado. that came through the entire province, we're seeing those increase, and the winds are prevailing strong winds, and that's resulting in substantial damage. And as all of you know, the buildings are getting bigger, they're getting more technical, they're getting lots more a lot more expensive. Um, as the construction costs go up, and some of those inflationary pressures we've seen are starting to subside, but still definitely prevalent compared to where they were in even 2019, 2020 pre-pandemic. So those are the big challenges right now in the insurance market, driving a lot of the changes you're seeing as a consumer. But I wanted to get in some of the jargon as well that you'll hear. You might hear this from your broker, your insurance professional, or agent, whoever you're dealing with on the insurance side. They may speak about some of these things. So just a quick refresher. Capacity is the insurance company's ability to, or willingness to provide a certain level of coverage or dollars. So you may hear there's challenges with capacity, or there's limited capacity in the marketplace. It means that there is less appetite for an insurance company to insure certain things to a certain level, or really at a certain value. They might require additional partners in that. They might be a reinsurance requirement, a lot of moving technical pieces, but that's what the capacity component refers to. Insurability and clients' insurability, or the ability to find insurance, is a primary concern, I think, for all insurance providers at this time. Are clients going to be able to find coverage for their operations at a reasonable amount, at a fair amount? Some of those things are in Ontario, we're fortunate to have a large competitive marketplace. There are a number of mutuals as well as cooperators and other organizations that participate in farm insurance. It's not like that in all provinces. So again, very fortunate here in the province of Ontario to have some strong market forces and competition. And again, good competition, solid providers of insurance coverage. Hard market, you would have heard that probably since the beginning of the pandemic, 2020, 2021. Increasing premiums and limited capacity is the combination that creates a hard market. So there's more rigid risk selection, more requirement on the insurance companies to, again, increase premiums because the claims have been paid out, and to ensure that they are viable. There is some legislation and regulatory requirements of insurance providers to maintain certain levels of capital so that they can pay their outstanding. If all of their losses or if all their insureds were to have a loss, they have to be able to pay that. So some of that requires increasing premiums to ensure that they are able to meet those promises that have been made already. How does this impact you as a client? That's a lot of jargon, folks. It's a lot of, frankly, it's just industry talk. How does this impact you as a client? Increasing premiums for some of you. I know increasing premiums in the province of Ontario have been a challenge for all providers of farm insurance. Potentially less coverage options available. You might have gone to your broker, your advisor, and looked for coverage. Okay, we can do this and this, and instead of being 10 options, there might be 2, or there might be 3, or it might be certain types of coverage that are available, whereas before there might have been more. Increasing deductibles, whether that's a $5,000, a $10,000, a $25,000 deductible. We've seen some of those across the offers, as well as the potential for updates. So there has been a lot of changes, whether that's through updating electrical panels or ensuring proper maintenance on the farmyard, machinery updates, things of those nature. You might have been asked by your insurance provider over the last couple of years to make some of those changes or start thinking about them. Those are all conditions that exist inside a hard market, which is currently what we're in as an Ontario farm insurance marketplace. How does this impact the insurance industry? There's also an impact to those of us who are insurance professionals. Lots of hard conversations, premium increases, difficulty sometimes placing coverage, additional onus and requirement on education for the consumer, the insurance consumer in Ontario. Again, increased workloads and difficult business decisions. Honestly, folks, it's not fun. I don't think any insurance professional in the province of Ontario, especially those working with our farm clients, love when premiums go up. It's not an exciting time. It's not something that anybody relishes in. It is challenging, but it's done as a business to ensure that we are able to pay those claims. So I know there's some pain on the consumer side. There's some pain on the insurance professional side, and we appreciate you working alongside your insurance professional to find those solutions and find that middle ground to continue to be able to do, again, feed the people of Ontario and of the world. That's what's going on in the industry. We're going to talk about there are some key elements I just want to revisit on your current insurance policies. If you have them in front of you, folks, great. If not, the key to all of this is having that relationship with your insurance professional, going and having a candid conversation about, is this covered, what's not covered. We'll talk a little bit about those key elements that make up your insurance coverage and things to consider as you're looking at it. So there's a liability component. There's a brief synopsis here, folks. I'm not going to get too far into that because I could talk to you about some of these coverages for days. Ideally, though, again, liability is designed to protect you from injury or damages that you may cause to others. So that's in the event that you're driving down the road and something happens, you're in the tractor, combine, baler, whatever's going on, somebody runs into you, there's an injury. Well, they're gonna come after the farm policy. If you are, in the process of going into our driveways and you knock somebody's mailbox over, or you bump into a shed of somebody else's, could happen. Anything can and will happen on an Ontario farm. The liability is there to protect you from the pending lawsuit or action that may come your way. Always recommend that you take a look at this. On Ontario, most Ontario clients are good to carry the $2 million. I highly recommend considering that $5 million limit. The Ontario farmers are seen somewhat as a bit of an allurement in terms of targets for some of these liability things. It's not unusual to see people slip and fall on orchards and have challenges around that. So making sure that piggy bank is there to protect you and your family. Very nominal cost increase to go to that 5 million, but definitely something to consider in having the conversation with your insurance professional. Property, very standard here, folks. Most insurance companies, most insurance providers in the province of Ontario will offer some sort of combination of one of or all of these items. Machinery, livestock, produce, your buildings, whether that's a barn, outbuilding, a structure, drive shed, and your homes or homes if you have multiple families living on the premises and participating in the farming endeavor. Loss of income, for those of you with your livestock operations, dairy, hog, poultry, looking at that loss of income component in the event that your structure burns down, blows down, has a loss that results in it not being able to function, has to be an insured peril. So again, conversation to have with your insurance professional. But that loss of income will allow you to replicate the amount that you are not collecting when that building goes down. So the general calculation is they'll take your milk check or your whatever you're receiving from the egg board. They'll reduce any expenses that are no longer continuing. So sometimes you don't have hydro bill or the hydro bill is changed. And then that payment is made on a monthly basis. So making sure that you have that, making sure that it lines up with your expectations and having that conversation, really important, especially as we get into, it's about to be heating season, might be turning on those heaters for the first time, having that conversation, make sure that you're properly covered. And then other coverages. So Sean talked about some of the pollution type exposures that exist with pesticide and fertilizer as well, making sure that you have some sort of on-site pollution cleanup, whether that's a standalone environmental impairment policy or just an on-site cleanup coverage. A lot of our Ontario operations have fuel tanks on premises, for like diesel tanks for the equipment, making sure that there's some sort of cleanup coverage available for that. Loss of use for machinery, ensuring that you have something in the event that, Murphy's Law, something happens and you're halfway through harvesting corn or beans and you don't have a header, or you don't have a combine, making sure that you have some sort of rental replacement there. And that can be funded through your insurance policy as well. Nominal charge, just making sure it's there. And as well as what are you covered for in terms of tools, tack, or other operations that you may be performing on your premises. Big one that I wanted to talk today, I removed a number of these slides, folks, to keep inside my time, because as I said, I could probably talk to you about all day about this stuff. Co-insurance. So on the bottom of every insurance policy in the province of Ontario, there will be this statement. This policy may contain a clause that limits the amount payable. Probably your face right now. And if it's not, it's Steve Carell's face. What are you talking about, Ben? Inside every insurance policy in a farm, we'll speak specifically to farm insurance during this conversation. It's an contract.
Yeah, we seem to be having an issue with Ben's connection. Let me see what we can do here.
I thought it was just me.
I think, Ben, can you hear us?
Ben must have just dropped. Maybe give him a second, and I'm sure he's frantically trying to log back on right now. He was pretty sure about his internet connection earlier too.
Okay, I see he's still logged on. Okay.
I'm just checking to see whether he's trying to get back into the meeting.
In the meantime, while we wait for Ben too, just another reminder, any questions related to the fire prevention or anything related to farm insurance, just drop it in the chat and we'll get that to Sean and Ben at the end of the presentations, assuming we get Ben back.
Is there any questions that we can start or I think most of them have to do with insurance that I saw.
Yeah.
I'm back here now, Ben.
Oh,
Okay.
all right, excellent.
That's okay. Let me just go back on. Sorry, folks.
No problem. Well,
It's not sharing, correct?
not
No.
yet. No.
And where did you lose me?
Right after, I think a slide or so after the Steve Carell slide.
Okay, great. I'll load it back up here. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Sorry, folks. We are getting hit with one of those windstorms that we are now used to here in Bowmanville. Let me know if that drops out again. But we'll continue moving forward. So we stopped after the Steve Carell slide, Ben?
Yeah, that was about right, I believe.
Let's just make sure I'm not leaving behind here, folks. Okay, here we go. So ensuring the value. So did we cover this piece?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, I'll restart from here. Sorry, folks.
I think we lost him again.
It would appear so. Maybe he'll pop back. It might just be frozen.
Sorry, everyone. Hopefully he'll be back in a second and a little bit more stable.
If he is able to make it back, you might suggest him turning off his video. That might give him a bit more bandwidth to deliver the presentation.
Good, yeah.
Thanks. It's weird that his presentation is still up here, though.
Yeah.
Technology is great when it works properly.
And if anyone has any questions for Sean on fire prevention, might be a good time to put it in the chat. If we are taking a little longer to get them back, maybe we could handle some of those questions while we wait. So if you do have a fire prevention question, now would be a great time to put it into the chat.
You're going to be happy. Out the door you go, and on your way to doing what other, the 900.
Oh, hi, Ben. I think, oh, and there he goes. Okay.
Did he not know that he wasn't?
Yeah, I don't think, oh, hey, Ben, I think you've been frozen for, you basically got 10 seconds into your slide and it froze for us.
Okay, let me go off camera here, and I'll try and share the bandwidth out. So I apologize for that, folks. It's usually very stable. So let me.
Very staticky too right now. Oh,
is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. Not much you can do. So we were still, I'd say, basically start from where we were gonna. Yeah, right.
Yeah, where we're gonna start before. Okay. Okay, folks, third time's a charm. Rub a rabbit's foot or pray to somebody for me because we're going to need it, I think.
Yes.
So we're going to experience some wind activity here in the province, or in in Bowmanville. Just want to talk about ensuring to value as a contractual requirement. So the did versus should, and at a certain component. So we always say you have to ensure to value. It's a contractual requirement inside your Ontario insurance policies. It says at the bottom of every policy document. So inside that, you'll see a continued requirement to have proper limits on your buildings. If you have those proper limits and you suffer a loss due to insured peril by your insurance policy, no problem. You're going to receive money for your claim. You're going to go about your day and continue on with your agricultural pursuits, your life, and you'll probably be pretty pleased with the outcome. However, in the event that it's not insured to value, there could be some challenges at the time of loss. So we'll talk a little bit about those. Again, this is housed in every insurance policy. So I'll use the scenario of a windstorm, something I'm experiencing here in Bowmanville. Current situation, I've used a drive shed outbuilding. The roof blows off or suffers damage from the wind. That is a usual, that's a very regular occurrence here. We see it a lot with our clients. The structure at the time of loss is going to cost you $50,000 to repair it. That's what we've deemed as the damage, $50,000. At the time of the loss, your structure is insured for $100,000. Pretty common coverage limit. But when we go out and assess it, we have a contractor go out, take a look. What is the building going to cost? The entire building to rebuild that structure as it stands today is $200,000. Again, remembering that the cost of construction and materials and labor has increased exponentially, primarily driven by those inflationary pressures of the pandemic and the labor shortage, as well as just the cost of materials. The question becomes, what would you receive? You weren't insured to value based on the current calculation. You're entitled to receive something, of course, but you've become a partner in that loss because the insurance to value piece was not there. How much would you receive from your insurance policy? Based on this calculation of having $100,000 in limit available to you for the peril of wind and suffering a $50,000 loss, but your building should have been insured to $200,000, would result in a $25,000 payment on your policy. There's a catch here. There's a deductible. 99.9% of all Ontario farm policies contain a farm deductible or contain a deductible of some sort on their policy, and you're going to result in it's going to become a $24,000 payment made to you and the client, or made to you. Just making sure I still have everybody, Ben. Thumbs up if you can.
You're still
Yeah,
here.
I think we are good. The
Great.
audio is a little crackly, but we're good.
Okay, thank you. So the payment would be $24,000. So not really what you're expecting, not really what the intended outcome is for you as a farm client. You're really expecting that claim to be paid. So I'm going to show you the conversation to have and make sure that you have those pieces up to date. So inside every insurance policy, there is a percentile number. It usually it's defined as a co-insurance. You'll see it usually beside your premium number. That number is the amount you are required to carry to avoid the co-insurance clause that exists on all of your insurance policies. So as long as, let's say this scenario happens again, and instead of having $100,000 in coverage, you have $190,000 in coverage, you are going to avoid that co-insurance challenge, and you're going to receive the full $50,000, less your deductible. There's always a deductible, less your deductible. That is the number to look at. That is the conversation to have with your insurance professional. Have I put enough value on this structure? Is this going to be sufficient in the event that I do have a partial loss? In the event of a total loss, you'll receive up to the limit you have insured to on the page. But ideally, that's what you're going to look at is how much have I insured to? Is it sufficient? Am I going to receive a total pay in the event of a partial loss? And partial losses are the primary concern, the primary claim type that we do see in all insurance providers. So it's contained in all of it. This is just how the calculation is built out. So it's the amount of insurance carried divided by the amount of insurance you should have carried, multiplied by the loss. So that results in a percentile, multiplied by the loss. So we said $50,000 minus your deductible. So whatever the deductible is your final payout. Where I'm really driving you towards, folks, to have the conversation, and I would say this is the number one exposure that our Ontario farm clients face today, is reviewing your policy with your professionals. So first conversation, probably with your insurance professional, whether that's a broker, an advisor, whoever that individual is to you, review those limits, have those conversations around, do I have enough? Does this make sense? Have we reviewed this in the last couple of years? Have a conversation, quick call to the machinery dealer. They're always happy to hear from you. I know you can hear them jumping when the phone rings. So they're always happy to have those conversations around this is what this piece of machinery is probably going to run today, making sure those limits are updated. Sometimes it's having a conversation with a local, whether it's a barn builder, outbuilding constructor, grain bin contractor, having those conversations, make sure those limits are in line. Yes, this is what we're seeing. This is generally what it's costing. Remembering that there is a bit of inflation when it comes to an insurance company showing up to pay that claim, but that's a joint conversation with the contractor, the client, and the insurance professional. And then connecting with your accountants as well. Does this, is this what we're seeing? Does this make sense? Accountants may be less so because they're not involved in that evaluation process, but definitely a valuable resource to lean on in the event that you are looking at, okay, is this providing what coverage we need it to provide? The biggest takeaway, folks, understand your coverage. It's a contract. The insurers, that's what they look at. The terms of the contract are read narrowly and interpreted broadly. So you want to look at them, have those conversations, and make sure you're aware of what is ongoing in your insurance policy. Does it meet your needs? Is it sufficient for what you want? Conversely, you can make changes too. I don't want to insure that piece of machinery. I don't want to insure that outbuilding any longer. I want to increase my deductibles. There are other components of that allow for that conversation to flow as well. And the piece that I want to leave this conversation with, co-insurance sounds big, bad, and ugly, and it's not a fun process, folks. Insurers are in the business of paying promises, and I think in Ontario we're very fortunate to have a large volume of insurers who abide by those promises. And whether it's our partners in the mutual space or at the cooperatives, the intention is to pay claims. We just need to make sure that those claims are able to be paid, and that a lot of that challenge right now is being seen at the limit level. So have those conversations with your professional. Have the conversation with people who understand your operation, your risk, are able to educate you and help you, coach you through those conversations, and ultimately, again, be accountable for you in the event that you do suffer a loss. So there may be some questions from that. I do apologize for the audio challenges there and perhaps the breakup of that video, but that's the common challenge I see right now for our Ontario Farm clients, generally in all regions of the province as well. We'll get into the back half of this, folks. I know we're approaching the timeline, so I'll try and move through this. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to throw them in the chat. Happy to answer them after. Manage, mitigate, and prevent. I'm talking to you, the first part of this is about the transfer part, the insurance component. But there's a lot that we can do as Ontario farms that you can do to help manage your risk, mitigate it, prevent it, and ultimately create a great scenario for yourself as farm operators and insurance clients. So I'll move into that component. So risk management is really the understanding of what your risk is and things you might do differently. How do you maintain your premises? Do you have processes, guidelines in place for employees, or how machinery is taken care of? What's the maintenance schedule look like? Ultimately, what actions are you taking to ensure that you're not going to see undue risk? Risk is inherent to everything that farmers do. It is the most dangerous job on the planet. Being aware of your exposures and where those exposures exist, that's a great practice to go through, whether that's with your insurance professional, whether that's with your accountant, any of those professionals, having them all in the room together, that's a great conversation to have as a team. Building your team out, your risk management team is going to help you and benefit you, especially in these hard market situations where we want to see you be successful. We want to see the farm continue to grow and develop, and whether it's obtaining new land or new machinery, we want to be part of that and able to provide that coverage at, again, a fair premium level for you as clients. The risk management process really helps with that endeavor as well. Risk mitigation. A lot of farmers are mitigating risk every day, and I don't know that they would say to any insurance professional, yeah, I do this to mitigate the risk. But every day a farmer makes a choice, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to take that road today because it's busy, there's whatever. We see it a lot with our agritourism orchard type operations now. Do you have proper parking notification? Do you have an onboarding process for guests, like, hey, when you come into the farm, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't touch that, don't go near the backs of animals, horses, cows, whatever. We see a lot more of that risk mitigation techniques flowing into the marketplace, which is awesome, really beneficial for our Ontario farmers and their operations. Helps us set proper expectations for people visiting the farm or employees who are working on your behalf as well. And if you change something to make your operation safer for you or the general public, some of you are taking your gas tanks and putting bollards around them, moving them back in the property. A lot of the time, it's the separation of buildings. So if you're in the process of building a new dairy barn, it's, well, instead of attaching it to the old dairy barn, let's put it back 200-300 feet. That's going to create better circumstances for you to obtain better pricing on your insurance, as well as reduce some of the challenges that we do see with the connecting of old electrical to new electrical, unless you're doing an entire electrical gut or infrastructure reconstruction there. That's examples of risk mitigation. Fantastic things. Make your insurance provider aware of those things. These are the things that we do that makes our operation different. These are the things that we're implementing to help alleviate some of those risks that we face every single day, every time you leave that front door. Farmers are taking on risk, and that's inherent to their world and also inherent to our world as insurance providers. The last piece is prevention, and there's lots of really, really cool things happening in the risk prevention space. Do you have fire extinguishers on your machinery? I know that Sean had talked about having those fire extinguishers on there. I have the little bullet here, folks, if you can see that, the one on the stairwell. If you can have 2 on your combine, so I'd say if you can have even a handheld one inside the cab, just to get off the machine, ensure your machine's to value, get off the machine. I hope that you never have to do that, but if you can at least fight your way out and get down the stairs and get away from it, that's the best case scenario. Don't want to ever see anybody get hurt in those fires. It does happen, but ultimately, if you could have 2 of those on, you might have a chance to put it out, save the machine. But inevitably, I do want you to be safe getting off those harvests. I know it's a long time of year. It's busy, long hours, late nights. But having those things charged and serviced before and after, whether it's before plant with the planter or after, ideal to have them ready to go for harvest season, especially when you're, some of these combines approaching $1 million. Not unusual to see $1 million combine anymore. With those we've seen some things from the manufacturers around fire suppression systems. So I know Case International is working on developing basically a tag-along unit to tie into their combine systems. That will allow for a suppression system to be built in. That's fantastic. That's going to help with some of the challenges around, generally combine is the big loss. We see a lot of those throughout the course of a regular year, and it happens, right? Chafe builds up. It's dry. It's light. Lots of machinery turning. Lots of friction. Catches on fire. It doesn't take long to get going once it gets going. And then you're looking at a couple $100,000 and an inconvenience of having to replace that unit in the middle of harvest when you really would rather just be in the field and getting it done. So we're looking forward to those improvements coming. Really looking forward to those improvements coming in the machinery space. The other big one is the electrical monitoring devices. So seeing a large number of clients going through that process. PrevTech is an organization that we see a lot of in the marketplace. They come in, so that in the top right corner, you'll see them installing it's an electrical infrastructure device that plugs into whether it's a dairy, poultry, hog barn, or anything with large electrical loads, and it monitors. It sends updates to your phone. It sends information to you directly. If you're having challenges, they'll say, hey, by the way, they'll call you and say, hey, you're having some things on the barn. We have a story of a client getting a call from this provider, and on the way out the door, phone rings. Yeah, I'm heading out to the barn to check it. It was a hog operation later at night. Walks into the barn and snaps a photo of one of his fans had a short or a charge, and it was on fire and it was hanging from the ceiling. So the client, took a photo of it and was able to put it out and not have any substantial loss. Whereas previously, that's probably you're losing 3,000-4,000 hogs and potentially $5-6 million in a barn. So really excited to see that come on, just for the peace of mind it's able to provide farm clients, and again, the operational efficiencies for their risks. And something as simple as, do you lock your gas tank? We had a run on there was a run on gas theft, just primarily in southwestern Ontario, actually, and lots of challenges around there. Lots of clients putting locks and keypads on their gas tanks. Fantastic to see that, but that's another example of the risk prevention process that goes into kind of risk management practices. lots of cool things on the way. Expect to see more in the marketplace moving forward. But those are kind of the key features. And the transfer one, folks, was you buy insurance coverage. So whether that's for the machinery for fire, or for your building for wind, or for your home for water and sewer backup, there is a way to buy coverage for almost everything. There are capacity challenges and limitations in what's able to be offered for certain types of risks. But ultimately, have that conversation with your insurance professional. Lots of fantastic insurance professionals here in the farm insurance space in Ontario. Find one that's passionate, educated, and ultimately willing to learn and grow alongside you as an Ontario farmer. But did want to thank you. I apologize for the challenges with the technology, but did want to thank you for taking the time to join us today and sharing the conversation. And hopefully we have some questions here as well. But thanks again to our partners at the Ontario Federation of Agriculture for having me as well.
Great, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Sean, as well, and thanks for everybody, for during our technical difficulties here. We do have some questions, and I'll throw it out to Sean and Ben of who would be the best respondents. Some of them will be pretty evident, but we'll see here. So, first question is this one will be for you, Ben. I have heard that some insurance companies ask for an inspection of corn maze. What would you be looking for?
Good question, Julie. So what we're generally looking for during any, whether it's an insurance inspection for any company, is the hazards for slip and fall. Primarily the agritourism exposures, people coming from off the farm. So whether they are, they've never been on a farm, or they're from, let's say they're from Toronto or an urban environment where they don't necessarily walk on uneven ground a whole lot. They're looking for allurements. Are the animals kept away to a certain extent? Like, again, if you have a petting zoo exposure, that's a little bit different. Really looking to make sure that slip and fall exposure isn't there. Slip and falls in Ontario and they continue to be a challenge. They average $85,000. Like, that's kind of the starting number for a slip and fall. That's why you saw the challenges with snow removal. For those of you who have friends in the snow removal business, very litigious environment when somebody gets hurt or it's a soft tissue injury.
Great, thank you. Next question, I think maybe for Sean, but correct me if I'm wrong. What are your thoughts on fire blankets for farm and housing where temporary workers might be staying on site?
Yeah, I can start with that one anyway. And also just to backtrack and touch on the corn mazes. It's not a requirement in any way that I know of, but I know just from the fire safety side, if you were building a corn maze, if you had emergency exits out of the corn maze, would be an amazing idea. It was just a small pathway that even if it's just not even an emergency, someone just gets scared and kind of freaks out and says, okay, I want out of here. That there are multiple places throughout it that would be marked that this is going to take you straight out. There's no more mazed. But on to fire blankets. Yeah, they're available commercially. There are, I don't know that many of them are going under the same kind of approval and testing as things like fire extinguishers do, but they are, we do see them in a lot of places. And if you do have them in a residence or any of your buildings, the key piece is to make sure that people know that they're there, what they are, and how to use them. And just to touch on the temporary workers. So if you are housing temporary workers, I'm not sure just who completely regulates it, but I do know that the fire service ends up getting involved. And to get your complete compliance and sign off, you will have to have a fire safety inspection completed. And the housing that the workers are living in will fall and have to meet the requirements of the Ontario Fire Code.
Okay, thank you. So the next question from Dave, this one will be for you, Ben. My insurer is giving me grief over storage of cars and boats in an empty farm building. Does your company support storage in underused farm buildings?
We do. I think the caveat to the question, the piece I'd say, Dave, is that every case, every risk is based on its own merits. But there are conversations. I know that there are challenges, especially pertaining to storage of cars with the batteries still attached. We've seen a number of large loss fires due to that. So there may be requirements or conditions for which the storage of those boats, vehicles. The other thing is if you're storing those, please ensure you have a proper storage contract to just to keep yourself protected. We have seen circumstances where clients are storing boats for others, they become responsible for the property, and something happens, you get into a care, custody, and control situation, and you're going to be liable for that. So just make sure that you mitigate that with a contract. But yeah, those are something we continue to see the expansion of revenue streams on Ontario farms. It's something that I think all insurers are aware of and actively looking to provide solutions. So happy to have that conversation outside the forum, but just everything's case by case. Every situation is based on its own merits is what I would say.
Great. Okay, next question. Brian asks, I believe this one would be for Sean. Is there a template for a farm safety plan that farmers can easily implement?
Yes, there are lots of templates available, and I would say again, first off, reach out to your local fire department, and they can get that to you. We do have one that's available that I can share with the OFA, and perhaps they can make it available through their website or something like that. And then again, just to touch again on the previous question, something else that I would consider from the fire side, when Ben was talking about expanding offerings that you're doing on what was originally started as a farming operation. So the farm building code and the definition of a farm building in the Ontario Fire Code, it kind of think about if you're changing your operation or adding other services, does that building still meet the definition of a farm building when you're changing what the operation out of that building is going to be? And again, that could be a simple thing as contact your local building department and or your fire department.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. Jackie asks, what resources are available to fire departments to consolidate agricultural training, as many rural fire departments are volunteer? And how can agricultural county organization support this?
That's a great question. And if we're talking about resources, I don't know if we're talking about financially, but I know most rural volunteer fire departments are always struggling budgetary wise, and we're always looking for people to partner up with. So like when I mentioned that maybe we find out that there's become an expansion of a certain type of farming operation in our area, and then we would be looking for people to partner with, whether it's just simply getting out there to see what these operations are, and then try to identify, is there any services or tools and equipment or training that the local fire department should be considering in the future to help with these? And are there organizations like the OFA or other local organizations that we could possibly partner up with to even try and do some fundraising to make that happen?
Can I just step in here quickly? Some of the local county federations have partnered with local fire departments and have helped them get grain extraction units and training into their areas. So I know there's at least 3 in Ontario that have done that within the last couple of years, which is great. And we encourage the local county federations to reach out to their fire departments and do more of that.
Excellent. And I see one more question that's come in. It's an insurance question. Is there any list for extra insurance to cover losses of perils due to natural catastrophic damages? As mentioned, water and wind, or more sewage coverage in the ag community?
So I would say currently Hartina, it's wind, big peril. Make sure you're insured for wind. That's a standard offer from insurance providers. Fire. So whether wind is tornado or hurricane, it's still wind. Water is a unique one. There are no flood coverages available for structures, which we saw some of those challenges in BC with the Pineapple Express and Atmospheric River a couple of years in the lower mainland. But there is flood coverage available for dwellings in the marketplace, so water losses to the dwellings. We don't generally see the flood exposure, knock on wood, in the province of Ontario because most of these areas most farms are built on the hill, frankly. They're built up from low-lying water areas. It's a more developed. That's what we've found anyway in the things we've seen. We haven't seen a large agricultural flood exposure. You can purchase those as part of your standard offer, is what I'd say. So if you're concerned about tornado, hurricane, yes, those are available, readily available in the marketplace, as well as fire. Fire, we see plain fires and that concern rising as temperatures rise, it gets drier. But that coverage is available, again, pretty standard offer from 99% of Ontario farm insurance providers for wind and fire. If you have other questions that are specific, feel free to email me those, or email Ben and Joanne. They'll get me the question over, and I can do some more research for you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ben. And I believe that is the end of the questions.
I had one that was just
okay.
directly sent to myself, and it's for Sean. Wanting to know if he has any comments about the Emily projects or Farm 911 projects, which is like the 911 signs on vacant farmland.
That's an excellent question. So for those who aren't familiar with, there is a project started, and it was called the Emily Project. And it's basically just that, getting additional 911 signage and addressing completed for, I guess it's not really vacant farmland, but the land that's being farmed and worked. It doesn't necessarily have buildings on it. So to make it easier to identify exactly where an emergency is versus using the home farm address, but meanwhile they could be working the land 3 concessions over the way farms are growing and the amount of land that certain operations are using. So they are not mandated by anything like by the province or by municipalities. They don't have to do it. What we really need is for if more areas are interested in having it expand, is to kind of have those conversations going again with contact your local fire department and want to find out more about something like the Emily Project. And then from there, it goes to your local municipality and they approve it. And then most of the 911 addressing is done at the county level. So then it has to be approved at the county level, and then it starts to get implemented. So there's a few hurdles involved in it to get it to happen in a local municipality. But it's definitely out there, and it's a project that I think is well worth looking into.
Again, a lot of our county federations have done those projects within their areas, which have been fantastic. I don't see any more questions. All right. I think that is a wrap. So thank you so much, Ben, for leading this, and the other Ben for speaking, and Sean as well. So thanks everyone for joining. And again, if you have any suggestions for future topics that people are interested in or you are interested in, let me know, and I'd be happy to set something up. Thank you very much, everyone.